It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is Jeff Helfgott, CEO of Boardroom Style & Lounge. Boardroom is an upscale men's grooming franchise that currently spans 46 locations across 8 states, with both corporately owned as well as franchise operations. They've been setting the benchmark in men's grooming for the past 20 years, and Boardroom's now on an aggressive growth path to expand their high-quality styling and grooming services in a relaxed and sophisticated third-place environment for men of all ages. Prior to Boardroom, Jeff was the CEO of Empower Aesthetics, COO of Excel Fitness, and Chief of Staff of Alamo Drafthouse. He is a proud U.S. Army veteran with a bachelor's degree in computer science from James Madison University and an MBA from Northwestern. Jeff loves scaling businesses by focusing on what makes them special, their people. Jeff Helfgott, welcome into the corner office.
Lovely to be here today. Thank you.
Great to have you with me. Where does the podcast find you today?
I am calling in from a very warm Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. All right. Well, summer hasn't quite receded there yet, I guess, huh? In a couple more months?
I wish it would go as fast as my hairline. It's holding on.
I love that. Well, Jeff, we always get started learning a little bit about our CEO guests and where they grew up and their early family life. Tell us a little bit about your beginnings.
Yeah, I grew up in Connecticut. I'm one of those Southerners that came down here to take all the jobs. And I started in Connecticut with a kind of an idyllic childhood. I kind of equated to what you would read from the Calvin and Hobbes comics growing up. Had a lot of wonderful woodland areas to play in. My parents allowed me to be very independent, so I had the opportunity to play outside, throughout the early morning until the dinner bell was rung. And then had wonderful kids of my age in the neighborhood to go play with, build relationships, and have adventures. So I look back at the childhood I was afforded, and I feel very fortunate.
Sounds very idyllic. What part of Connecticut?
A little town called New Britain, which is back on the radar because one of our claims to fame was Stanley Tools, which is now known for their cups of all things.
Right. Cool. Mom and dad, did they work locally in the home? What was their professions? What were their professions?
I grew up in kind of an atypical household at the time. This was early 80s, and my mom was the key breadwinner, which was, again, unusual at the time, but becoming much more commonplace now. My dad had a really interesting career where he had a master's degree. He was exceptionally well educated for our blue collar area, and he chose to invest his life and career in helping people who are undereducated or undertrained get access to better training so that they could have a better career path. And he was effectively operating off of state grants and support from local businesses who would be hiring the people to back in, but it left very little salary for him. And at the time, I really had a hard time absorbing why he would not choose to be leveraging his education to make more money for the family. I grew up very financially minded. My parents called me Mama's little capitalist. I think I asked for a savings bond for my birthday present when I was 4 or 5 because of the great return. And just such a difference from where my father chose to focus. He was very focused on helping the community and helping the people in it. And my mom did not have a college education, but just created an incredible career for herself that really helped support the family. So I just grew up looking at family norms a little differently. And I think that's been a tremendous help for me the rest of my life.
I like that. What did mom do?
She was a state comptroller. So she worked for the state of Connecticut, had a great career. She got to be on both sides of union conversations. So I think it's given me what I would consider to be a more balanced view of some of those labor negotiations, seeing her on both sides of the table. They're also very active in local politics and really devoted a lot of their time trying to shape the community. And I think it really gave me an appreciation for the amount of work that local politics requires. It also gave me an understanding very early in my life that I would never want to do that myself. But I truly do appreciate people who devote so much of their time to helping their communities.
Brothers and sisters?
Just me.
Yeah, cool. And if you think back, kind of the key inspirations, I think I know what they are. It sounds like dad was very service oriented, but were there other things that your parents kind of, gave you in terms of inspiration or influence during those early years?
I really have appreciated over time the family dynamic that we had. Um, they were a family that allowed me to earn more autonomy as I demonstrated competence. And that's a mindset that I try to bring to my profession today. I think there's the term helicopter parenting, and now there's bulldoze parenting, where you knock down all the obstacles in the way of your children. As someone that has a young kid of my own at this point, I spent a lot of time thinking about what our philosophy will be with raising kids. And what I really appreciated in hindsight about my parents was uh, they took an approach of they will helicopter, or in business terms, micromanage until I've demonstrated I know what right looks like and can do that on my own independently. And once I've demonstrated good judgment and the ability to do things safely, they gave me a lot of free reign. And I'm very thankful for that because I think it created an air of independence that's enabled me to operate just at a slightly higher level than I might have otherwise.
Probably good, really good training and leadership too at that stage.
Tremendous,
Yeah,
tremendous.
cool. Did you like school? Did you do well? What were some of your interests then?
I liked school up until about seventh grade, and then, for whatever reason, is probably hormone related. I started to have a harder relationship with it. I was one of those students that was very fortunate to be naturally gifted with some level of intellect where I didn't have to work super hard. And then I got to college and I got kind of punched in the face because I was operating against people who were similarly gifted and with some levels of coursework that were just beyond what I could do without really grinding on it. So it was a real we'll say enlightening moment when I got out of high school, kind of left the nest, and then had the opportunity to pick my own path, and then saw that I was going to have to work a lot harder than I was used to. And it was a great inflection point for me to say, is this something that I'm going to work for, or am I going to settle for what's comfortable? And I'm proud of myself in that moment for really stepping up and accepting that I was not going to be the best in some of these classes, but I was going to work as hard as I possibly could to compete with the people who were.
That's great. What about entrepreneurial activities? Anything you did as a kid or worked through high school?
Yeah, I wouldn't have earned that moniker unless I was hustling. I started off doing little things, and one of my first actual jobs was sweeping hair in a barber shop when my dad went to get a haircut at a place called Luigi's. The barber, such a clever, clever guy. Uh, he saw a young kid coming in, the clientele of mostly regular gentlemen who came every other week or so for their haircut, and saw that this could either be a disruption or he could make this into a really positive experience. So he paid me $1 to sweep up hair while we were waiting for my father's haircut. And it just taught me an appreciation for hustling for the money. In hindsight, I look back at it and also recognize what a great experience that was for him. I'm sure my dad more than compensated him back for that dollar that he paid me, but also allowed him to uh, create a more productive environment where I wasn't messing around like, it's natural for young kids to do if they don't have something. And I just kind of built upon that. My next was a paper route. I started working at a music store at the age of 16 or 17. It just built a lifelong passion for working hard for that next dollar.
I noticed on your LinkedIn profile you've got the look beyond the barber shop. Did that have anything to do with those early years?
I think the when I had the call for this opportunity, I wasn't looking, but I've had a long-standing passion to get into the barbershop industry. And candidly, with another great operator that I had some relationship with, we were looking at a concept that had been based in the Midwest before, probably about 5 or 6 years ago. So I think this lifelong affinity for that early first job, air quote job, um, when Boardroom called, I was really excited to take it.
That's awesome. Well, let's not go there yet, but I want to get a little bit of the early career experience. So, was it kind of a foregone conclusion you'd go to college? It sounds like mom didn't, dad maybe did. Was that something that you kind of drove, or did mom and dad really kind of inspire you to get on to university? Because you got your MBA as well, right? You did
I
both
did.
your undergraduate James Madison and on Northwestern. Great schools.
Yeah, great memory. I grew up in the generation where college was really the de facto standard if you wanted to have a great career. And I'm very thankful that over the last couple of years, there seems to be a mindset shift that's opened up parents and students' eyes to recognize that there are great career paths and trades. But I think I felt the pressure early on that if I wanted a life changing experience and to create a better outcome for myself and for my children, college was the way to go. So it was a question of where, and I built something I called the compass rule when selecting a college. I took out one of those old fashioned compasses with a point and the pencil. I pulled out a map and I measured out about 500 miles on the legend and then
Was
put
that a
the
minimum or
pinpoint.
a maximum?
No, that's the neutral zone. See,
That's
if
a
you go
neutral
shorter
zone.
than that, you're close enough where your parents can drive to visit you more frequently. And if you're farther than that, they can fly. So I picked that
I like
500-mile
that.
range or so, and that led me to Virginia. And from there, it was just a selection of which was the best fit.
And you went on to the Army after undergrad, which is a little bit of an interesting twist. Tell us what motivated you down that road.
Yeah, that was my first real pivotal moment where I realized that there was more to life than money. And don't get me wrong, I still do love earning it. And I think my career choices since have certainly highlighted that. But I went to school with the intent of being a computer programmer.
Hmm.
I had a web development company at the end of my time in high school, back to the entrepreneurial life. And at the peak, I was earning about 75 an hour, which, as a high school kid in the
Pretty
90s was
good.
absolutely incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's still great today, truly. Um, so my intent was to build upon that career. And when I was in my university days, freshman year, I was walking through the campus and I saw some people in camouflage that were rappelling off a really tall building. And I thought, oh, that looks like fun. So I took ROTC as an elective, and I
Hmm.
just absolutely fell in love with the people. They were values driven, they were hardworking, but when they could have fun, they cut back and just had really strong relationships built on authentic connections. And I thought, man, if the military is full of people like this is where I want to be. So I very much surprised my parents and many other people because I had struggled with authority for most of my life growing up. But I'm so thankful that I did because it just, I think, unlocked a passion for working with people in helping them achieve more in their careers than they might have otherwise. That I just don't know if I would have found in the same way in IT.
Love it. And you achieved captain rank. Again, thank you for your service. Did you consider, a career in the Army at that stage? Obviously being enlisted and going through the ranks, I'm sure that was an option.
It was a very compelling one, and that was the plan. I did get injured a couple of times overseas, and then by the end of that, it was clear that the part of the military that I enjoyed the most, the field work, being with the frontline troops, that was likely not in the cards anymore. And I thought if I was going to have to do a desk job, I might as well do it in the corporate world rather than with the military for a number of factors. And I'll tell you, Mama Helfgott was very happy with that choice. She slept a lot better after I got out.
Yeah, got it. And you kind of stayed associated with it because I think it was USAA was your first job, correct?
It was a really great landing ground. I was fortunate that I worked with a great uh, recruiting team called Cameron Brooks, who specializes in helping junior military officers transition out of the military by giving them a training protocol of reading books and then thinking through how they position their career in terms that are understandable for people that don't have that military experience. And then they have something they call the hiring day, where they bring together these candidates with a number of larger companies that are excited to recruit from those ranks, and understand that bringing in someone with that background is a little bit of a learning curve, and they're willing to make that investment to ensure a good transition. And obviously, that's just a great fit for USAA. So I had a couple of really great options, Ernst and Young, ExxonMobil. But what really attracted me to USAA was not only the mission and values, and being part of a brand that I just really appreciate and admire from being a member before I was an employee. But really, the woman that recruited me there was just such a special person. And in the theme of following great people, that's kind of been the connection of my life to date. I bet on I would learn a lot from her, and I'm very thankful that I did.
Yeah, awesome. I think you went into an IT management role, so you probably started managing people at that stage. Is that the first time you had the opportunity? Well, I guess you had leadership obviously in the Army as well, but tell us a little bit about those leadership experiences early on in your corporate life.
It's much different. People have a lot of admiration for the military and the leadership lessons you learn there, and rightfully so. I am a much better person and a much better leader as a result of that. Leading in the corporate world is different, and in many ways it can be harder, actually. And the difference that I learned is, in the military, if you're having a bad day, you can't just quit. Your team can't just quit. You have a lot of opportunity to try to make things right. Then the military rotates you every 2 years or so to a next duty station. So you have the opportunity to kind of experiment with your leadership voice and then apply that in your next role with not truly a full clean slate, but you can evolve and find your authentic voice as a leader. In the corporate world, you have to switch jobs to do that. And more importantly, if you are not the leader that your team needs you to be, they'll quit. And then you're left in a really tough area. So there's a little bit of an art to understanding how do you approach difficult conversations that I had to learn. And USA, again, was such a great place to do it because they invest so much in leadership development, management course training. They really put an emphasis on role playing exercises. So, in terms of finding a great place to transition from a military model to a corporate one, they were a great partner.
Can you share some of the leadership lessons that, ported from the military into USAA and some that didn't?
Yeah, great question. On the first, for lessons that poured over, I think a true interest and passion in your team is something that really does convey well and continues to. With the military, it's really kind of unique. And I think when people leave and they discuss the camaraderie as being hard to find in the corporate world, this is what they're talking about. You, as a leader in the military, are dealing with people of very different backgrounds. Some come from broken homes, some were exceptionally well educated but not fulfilled. Um, so to your team, you're everything from a boss, a mentor, a financial planner, a marriage counselor. Um, you really have the opportunity to play an outsized role in these people's lives. And it's harder to do that on the corporate side. But the mindset of how can you put your people first and their needs and be mindful of them while still keeping the mission that the organization has in mind is something that conveys exceptionally well. And I credit a lot of that to the success that I've had since. Something that has not conveyed, and this was probably my first real major mistake in the corporate world, was the idea of feedback being part of every culture.
Mm.
Many people have heard something that the military calls the after action review. For whatever reason, the corporate world has chosen to call that a postmortem in many organizations, which sounds grimmer. Um, but the idea of it is, how can we learn from the experiences that we just had? And in the corporate world, especially, it has a kind of a truly negative connotation to it. In the military, it's built into the DNA that we are an organization of lessons, and we need to be learning from every new engagement so that we are better than we were yesterday. And what I would love about this structure in the after action review is you would solicit two things that went well in the exercise that we just conducted, and one thing we could do to be even more effective. So I was at one point in a team meeting, and I had asked one of my developers to give an overview of a project that he had been working on, because I just thought it was so interesting. The rest of the team would really value hearing about what he had been working on. So I worked with him for the week prior to that team meeting on the content that he would choose to deliver to make sure that he would feel comfortable and confident in it, because I knew presenting is not something that comes naturally to everyone. And when he was done presenting, I was just thinking, like, man, he did such a great job. I would love for him to get this feedback from the team. And I asked, as soon as he was done, I'm like, all right, everyone, let's give it up for him. And now let's think of two things he did really well and one thing he could do even more effectively next time. And it was like I kicked a dog right in the middle of the team meeting. Like, it was silence, like the stereotypical tumbleweed rolled across the table. And I realized in that moment, like, oh man. So I walked out of that team meeting and I went right to my VP's office and I knocked on the door. Kevin Kraft, great IT leader. I still have handwritten notes from some of the things that he taught me. And I said, Kevin, I think I made a mistake. And I told him what happened. And he laughed and said, Jeff, let me tell you two things. One, in the 10 years that I have been a leader here, no one has ever come knocked on my door and said I made a mistake. Two, we are not yet a culture that embraces open feedback publicly like that. And you can either try to change that and face a really difficult uphill, or you can acknowledge that this might just not be the organization where that's welcome. And I'm very, very thankful for that
Good
lesson.
counsel. Yeah. Love that. Great. So you left USAA and decided to go back to graduate school and get your MBA. Tell us a little bit about that thought process. What led you to that conclusion?
Another great leadership lesson. I alluded to this about following great people, and one of the ones that I was following was the woman that I interviewed with at USA. Her name's Renee Schroeder. She's now very high up at Charles Schwab and has earned that role in all the roles she's had. She was my direct supervisor for the period of time at the end of my time at USAA. And at one point, she sat me down and said, Jeff, you are great here, but you could be even better somewhere else. And she really encouraged me to continue to grow from what was a very operational and tactical role at USAA to a place where I could be more strategic and have more influence over the direction of a company. So she really encouraged me to apply to graduate school and wrote me a great letter of recommendation. I think between that and Kellogg kind of having a soft spot for veterans, I was able to get into a great program. And I think about that all the time, about what it takes for a manager to take one of their higher performing people and encourage them to go be great somewhere else. And I am just exceptionally thankful for her and trusting me with that feedback and giving me the kind of the nudge out of the nest to go meet my full potential. And I've tried to pay that forward ever since.
Very selfless move. I love that. And then McKinsey was next. And again, a very interesting pivot. What attracted you to the consulting world?
I've always been fascinated on culture. And back to Renee and her counsel, her perspective was grad school will teach you what business is academically, but consulting is a great way to get a lot of reps by having a lot of projects in a short time frame, seeing how a lot of different companies operate. But it had the added benefit of allowing me to see what the actual cultures were and what combination of tactics, behavioral activities, compensation plans, et cetera, could lead to what I would consider to be the best outcome for the problems that those companies were facing. So it was just such a great experience, and I'm really thankful that USAA gave me a great exit if I needed it. When I left, I had enough of a reputation and I think support around the organization where they offered me the opportunity to come back in an executive role after graduate school. So I was really just playing with a great uh, card in hand where I could go to these interviews and say, like, I'm not willing to accept anything other than the best possible outcome from these interviews, because if I don't get the best, I have a great one just waiting for me.
Yeah.
And McKinsey was one of those places where it had such a pedigree for being a place where only the best are accepted. I knew I would learn a tremendous amount from the other people who were working there. And I wanted to lean on my IT experience to date, plus build upon that pedigree with a great group like McKinsey. So when I was interviewing, I said I would only be interested in a role with their Palo Alto office, where I could lean on that IT experience and then learn the consulting. And I would not recommend that as an interview strategy. It's better to be open to any office because it just opens up more doors. But it ended up working out, and I learned a tremendous amount there. And again, just some incredible people.
Was there any particular sector or industry that you kind of consulted in and said, wow, I want to know more, and, kind of led you to your C-suite jobs, which we'll get to in a minute?
I was a natural fit for financial services because USA has had such a great reputation for not only their customer service, but the processes that help deliver those experiences consistently. And the fact that I was on the IT organization there and worked with so many of the investment management group, business partners, just made me a really natural fit to do financial services. Now, most of those were East Coast based, so it was not an enjoyable lifestyle flying from the West Coast to the East Coast and back every week. But that was a place where I really felt I could demonstrate competence day one and begin to, because so much of consulting is not only the value that you can create through your insights and access to great analyses that help inform the direction of a business, but frankly, in the confidence that you give the executive team in making these decisions. There used to be the expression like no one ever gets fired for hiring IBM. In my experience, it's a lot of what consulting work was, that 90% of the time the client knew what the right answer was, but they needed a higher degree of conviction before they would make this decision, just considering how impactful that would be in their strategy, how much capital, and more importantly, time they'd have to invest in executing it. So they really wanted to have confidence in the outcome. So leaning on an industry that I already had some degree of experience on allowed me to be that competent and confident, trusted advisor to people that were really making what could be business altering decisions for themselves and career altering decisions for themselves as well. So that was a place that I leaned on. Over time, what I saw was I really enjoyed the operational side of those engagements. And one of my favorite ones was helping a large financial service customer uh, help transform their support organization through the East Coast. And that meant everything from doing ride alongs to technicians that were going from bank to bank to help repair some of their systems, and then taking a look back at the tech ecosystem that was supporting them to say, how do we rationalize this ecosystem that's grown through a Frankenstein style of M&A slapping together systems and help this um, evolve into something that's a better reflection of the needs of the organization today. So I spent a lot of time on the ground with frontline workers, and I think it just reminded me of my passion that I had for that type of operational role.
And true enough, your first C-suite experience was as a chief operating officer with Excel Fitness. I think you spent about 6 years there. Tell us a little bit about that company. What were your main contributions during that time?
Another great example of following great people. I had a prior relationship with their financial sponsor, Altamont Capital, who was just a tremendous partner, especially through COVID. Very thankful that they were supporting us through those times. And through that prior relationship, I saw that they had closed that transaction. It happened to be in Austin, so I reached out to Altamont and said, hey, congrats on this close. I'm in town. If there's anything I can do to help this investment be more successful, I'd love to talk to you. And within hours, they reached back out and set me up with an interview with the founder's CEO. And it's if you picture it like a movie, I was meeting him at a Starbucks in Pflugerville. I was dressed like a private equity interview in a suit and a nice crisp white shirt. And then he was dressed like he was just on the roof of a gym because he had been. Like he has sneakers, he had some gym shorts on, he had like an Ed Hardy really tight t-shirt. And the guy's built like an action figure. Like he's just a really in shape guy. And he stands up in what could have been a really awkward moment. He says, looks like one of us is either overdressed or underdressed. And he gives me a big hug. He gave me a hug before we even starting to talk. And I just knew this was someone I was going to have a great time building a business with. We were scheduled for half an hour. We ended up talking for 90 minutes about people and culture and what we want to build. And I'm just so thankful that he gave me the opportunity to join the team and earn my right to be a part of what they are building. It's certainly changed my life. And Excel was just such a great story. When I started, we had 17 locations through a mix of M&A, acquiring other great Planet Fitness franchisees in different territories, and then building new locations around them. We exited 6 years later with 92 locations. And I think what I am most proud of is the way we were able to elevate the livelihoods and careers of just so many people by creating opportunities with this growth. Something I'm very proud of to this day.
I love it. Well, we're going to get now back to looking beyond the barber shop. You're coming up on 1 year with Boardroom Styling Lounge. Tell us a little bit about the company, your current mandate, vision, mission, and your organization there.
Boardroom is such a special place. It was founded 20 years ago now. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary, and we actually have a campaign going as we speak to celebrate this with our clients that have helped us reach this moment. The reason it's had this longevity is I think it speaks to an unmet need. There are great places if a guy just wants a haircut, and you can get in and out in 15 minutes. Boardroom is a place where we create experiences. Our mission is to help men relax, look great, and feel confident. And the way that I look at it, you can't open up any news articles without hearing about the mental health challenges, especially in men.
Young men in particular.
Young men in particular. And there's a lot of it where they just don't feel a camaraderie. There's a lack of confidence and with some of the challenges facing the world, I can understand why people would feel that. And there's a lot of a hustle culture. You can't open social media without some reel suggesting here's how you can make more money on the side, and here's how you can look your best all the time. There's a lot of pressure on people, especially men. And what Boardroom has created is a place where men can truly relax and invest in themselves. There are 168 hours in a week. We encourage men to take 1 hour for themselves and do it with us. And that message has resonated so well. So we are a place where it's more than a haircut. It's an experience. And over time, that's resonated enough where we've been able to grow to 46 locations across 8 states and many more to come. So my mandate was to come on board, help Boardroom understand how they could continue to be relevant for the next 20 years and where our growth angles were. And it's been so much fun to meet the team. I had a hypothesis of what that growth plan would be, and some of that was informed from our financial sponsor, Light Bay Capital, who's been just such a great sponsor to date. But like most hypotheses, you have to test them and then often find it's not exactly what you thought. So my first 90 days, I tried to embody what I learned in the military, where unless life, limb, or eyesight are at risk, just seek to understand before seeking to change, especially in the first 30 days. So I spent the first 3 months trying to visit every one of our 46 locations across 8 states and spent time talking with the frontline managers, with the frontline stylists and barbers, with our front desk team members, just really to understand where they see the most opportunity, what's working well with our clients, and where could we be even better than we are today. And that's helped us coalesce around really 4 initiatives this year. And as we've done that, we've seen such a tremendous improvement in some of the key metrics that we were looking at. And just to share with you, existing guest retention, we've improved that over 16% just this year to date, where we're earning the loyalty of people who are coming through our doors. And what's really important to me is we are seeing our employee retention drastically improve. We are 33 to 35% better than we were last year, and we are now at our lowest levels of employee churn ever. And those are the metrics that, to me, begin to inform the revenue downstream. So couldn't have done it without a great team that was already in place, giving them a little bit more direction and form from this time. And I just know the next 20 years are going to be so much better for us.
Fantastic. Congrats on that early success. How do problems get solved inside Boardroom, and when do you get involved?
I'm a big believer in management operating systems. We use a slightly modified version of EOS, which I'm sure most of your
Traction.
listeners are
Yep.
familiar with. Absolutely. It's a great framework. And what I love about it is it firmly establishes who owns what decisions, and with clarity brings execution. And where there's conflict, that's where I come in. So fortunately, we invested early on in building a version of the accountability chart. We call it the authority matrix, but it even gets down to like what spend can happen throughout the organization. And it's a way of highlighting, here's the structure that we think is appropriate. If we need to revisit it, we can do that. But in the meantime, feel free to operate with autonomy in these areas. And we treat it like a living document. Like I said early, with my parents, and this is something that I'm trying to convey to this organization.
Thank you, Brant.
Until we have had the opportunity to train our teams on what right looks like, we're going to put a pretty narrow area for them to operate in. But as we demonstrate what we think right looks like, and then they have the opportunity to show they do know what right looks like and they can do that consistently, then we give them a lot more rope to play with. And I think that mindset is something that has really enabled some of my past organizations to reach their full potential. And we have our salon manager conference where we're flying in all of our managers from all across the nation, our franchisees, and some other partners at the end of October, where we'll really get to talk through a couple more things that we're going to be doing to further empower our team. I'm just so excited to get this in front of them.
What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in or franchise with and hire at Boardroom?
Really 2 things. Number one is resilience. We are a small but mighty company still, and 46 locations sounds big, and it is. It's objectively bigger than many businesses will ever aspire to be. But I look at this as still the early innings of what we can be. And we're scrappy, and sometimes it means you try stuff and it doesn't work out. Sometimes it means that you have to wear a couple hats. Some of them you're not familiar with or comfortable with. And I just love people that have a resilience and are able to overlook some of the setbacks because they see the overall progress that they're making. So in an interview, I look for people that have had jobs early in their life, especially sales. In sales, your job is to be someone that fails professionally because you get told no all the time, and you have to figure out, how do I pick myself back up and have a goldfish memory so I can focus on the next opportunity. So really resilience, early jobs, and people who've had some kind of sales position are people I just love to be working with. The second would be coachability. We're a growing organization, and what worked yesterday might not work tomorrow. So I look for people that are open to growing with us, and people who can accept feedback, who understand how to give it with caring and candor, because we're an organization that is growing together. No one is above it, myself included. So if I have someone that can demonstrate resiliency and coachability, I know I have someone special.
Love that. What have you found to be the most impactful executive development activity for yourself as well as your executive team?
I absolutely love rehearsals. And I do this before every board meeting. I've done this with my last 3 organizations, and I credit this to a tremendous amount of accelerated executive development with my teams. We try to finish our board deck material generally about 2 weeks before the board meeting. We do the outline generally 6 weeks before and give people plenty of time to prepare. And then I take some time, generally 8 weeks before, to say what's the messages that are most important based off the feedback that we received in the last board meeting and then the progress that we made to date. The old backwards planning method has worked fabulously there. And that gives us plenty of time to sit down as a team before the board meeting itself or any other major event, be it salon manager conferences, major investor days, franchisee meetings. This concept holds true in all of them. And with this content, we walk through a couple live runs, and I generally play kind of in a red team format where I act as a board member and then I'm asking questions as a board member or as a franchisee, whoever our audience is, in order to the team to think through how they will respond and do they need to adjust the content to better answer some of these questions before they're asked. But the most important thing is not only feeling prepared and confident to deliver the material, but I think it helps train the mindset of people who are earlier in their career by acting as people who are later in their career and anticipating what their questions will be. So the feedback that I've gotten from every one of my teams is that's the one exercise that they found the most helpful in their continued professional development. And I always make the time for that.
Love it. Jeff, your insights on leadership and training and development as well as preparation have been super insightful, but we're just about out of time. However, we do have one last question we asked all our guests, and that's what career and life advice would you have for our listeners, and particularly someone who has their eyes on their own corner office someday?
Just follow great people. I think when I look back at the connecting tissue between the career that I built to date, it's following incredible people who are values driven in a way that aligns to the organizations I want to be part of and the life that I want to lead as a business person and as a father, and following them because I have learned so much from them. It's accelerated my ability to reach the chair that I'm in today, and I'm a better person for it.
Love it. My guest today is Jeff Helfgott. He's the CEO of Boardroom Styling Lounge. He loves scaling business by focusing on what makes them special, their people. Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thank you for hosting.
Hey, listeners, we're now including your questions with our CEO guests. If you'd like to send in a voice memo, send it to info@go4roi.com, and we'll read it on the air to one of our future CEO guests. Thanks so much for listening, and share it with friends.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.go4roi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.